Your brain is lying to you. Right now, it's convincing you that thinking longer, harder, deeper will eventually lead to clarity. That if you just replay that conversation one more time, run through that decision one more time, predict that worst-case scenario one more time, you'll feel better. But neuroscience has proven something brutal after a certain point. More thinking doesn't create answers. It creates anxiety. It creates paralysis. It creates a version of you that's too afraid to act, too exhausted to feel, and too trapped to move forward. And the terrifying part? Your brain knows exactly what it's doing. This isn't a video about productivity hacks. This isn't a list of 5 ways to stop overthinking. What you're about to understand goes deeper than that, into the hidden architecture of your own mind, into the precise psychological mechanism that turns your thoughts against you, and into why the advice everyone gives you, just stop thinking about it, is not only useless, it actually makes it worse. But here's what most people don't realize. Overthinking isn't a personality flaw. It's not a sign of weakness. It's not even a mental illness. It is a feature, a deeply sophisticated feature of the human brain, one that evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to keep you alive. The problem? The world changed. Your brain didn't. And that gap between the ancient mind you inherited and the modern life you're trying to live is where overthinking was born. Think about the last time you made a simple decision. What to say in a text, whether to speak up in a meeting, whether to trust someone, whether to leave, whether to stay. Now think about how long it actually took you, inside your head, to process it. 5 minutes? An hour? 3 days? Here's the strange part. Research from the University of Michigan found that people who identify as overthinkers spend an average of 3 times longer mentally processing decisions than people who don't, even when the outcome is identical, 3 times longer, for the same result. But it gets more uncomfortable. That same study found something the researchers didn't expect. The overthinkers felt less confident in their final decision than people who spent far less time thinking. More thinking, less confidence, worse emotional outcome. So why does your brain keep doing it? That's not the real reason, and what's underneath is far more revealing. To understand why your brain overthinks, you need to understand what it's actually afraid of. Not the thing you're worried about on the surface. Not the email you haven't sent. Not the relationship you're analyzing. Not the career decision you can't make. Your brain is afraid of something far older, far more primal. It's afraid of being wrong. See, tens of thousands of years ago, your ancestors lived in a world where being wrong could literally kill you. Wrong read on a predator, wrong choice of which path to take, wrong interpretation of someone else's intentions. The human brains that survived were the ones that refused to stop thinking, that kept running simulations, that never fully committed until every angle was covered. Those brains passed their DNA down to you. So when you lie awake at 2 a.m. running through a conversation you had 3 weeks ago, your brain isn't malfunctioning. Your brain is doing exactly what it was built to do: protect you from a threat it can't actually see. The problem is, the threat isn't a predator. It's a text message. It's a deadline. It's someone's opinion of you. But your ancient brain doesn't know the difference. And here's where everything changes. Here's a truth that might actually make you angry. The more intelligent you are, the more likely you are to be an overthinker. A landmark study published in the journal Psychological Science found a direct correlation between high verbal intelligence and what researchers called excessive self-generated thought, which is the clinical term for what keeps you awake at night. Translation: smarter brains ruminate more. Why? Because intelligence is essentially the ability to simulate futures in your mind, to model outcomes, to run what-if scenarios before they happen. That skill, in the right amount, is extraordinary. It's how humans built civilizations. It's how great artists and scientists and leaders operate. But in overdrive, it becomes a nightmare you can't wake up from. The strange part is, your brain actually rewards you for overthinking. Every time you think through a scenario, your brain releases a tiny hit of dopamine, the same neurotransmitter as a social media like, the same one as a bite of sugar. Your brain has made overthinking addictive, and you didn't choose it. Your brain chose it for you. There was a woman. We'll call her Sarah. Sarah was offered a promotion, a real one. More money, more responsibility, a title she'd worked 6 years to earn. But Sarah didn't sleep for 2 weeks. She made lists. She drew diagrams. She texted her friends at midnight. She Googled, "Should I take a promotion even if I'm scared?" at 3 a.m. and then spent 4 hours reading every result. By the time she made her decision, she was exhausted, hollowed out, and somehow, even though she said yes, she felt less excited than the day she got the offer. Psychologists call this decisions fatigue by simulation, the phenomenon where overthinking an outcome robs you of the emotional energy needed to actually experience it. Sarah got everything she wanted, and her brain had spent so long imagining every possible way it could go wrong that when it went right, she barely felt it. That might sound familiar, because here's the real trap, and this is where most people get it wrong. In your brain, there is a region called the default mode network, or DMN. When you're not actively focused on a task, this network switches on automatically. It's the part of your brain responsible for daydreaming, self-reflection, and imagining the future. In healthy doses, it's one of the most powerful cognitive tools you have. But in overthinkers, the default mode network doesn't switch off. Neuroimaging studies from Yale University found that overthinkers show hyperactivity in the DMN even when they're trying to focus on something else. It's like having a second browser tab open in the background, constantly running, constantly consuming memory, even when you don't realize it. And here's the piece that stunned researchers. That hyperactivity doesn't just drain mental energy, it physically shrinks the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for rational decision-making and emotional regulation. In other words, the more you overthink, the worse you get at making decisions. The more you try to control outcomes through thought, the less emotional control you actually have. Overthinking is not a solution. It is slowly dismantling the part of your brain you need most. Here's the trap most people never escape. When you feel anxious, you think more. When you think more, your brain releases cortisol. When cortisol rises, your threat detection sharpens. When threat detection sharpens, everything feels more dangerous. When everything feels more dangerous, you think more. This is called the rumination loop. And the terrifying thing about it is that it feeds itself. Every time you try to figure it out by thinking harder, you are adding fuel. You are telling your nervous system, this is a real threat. Stay alert, keep processing, and your brain, loyal, ancient, obedient, obliges. It keeps processing for hours, for days, sometimes for years. The thing you've been replaying in your head, that old conversation, that old version of yourself, that old mistake, your brain hasn't let it go because it doesn't believe you're safe yet, and no amount of additional thinking will convince it that you are. So what actually works? This is the insight that changes everything. Your brain does not respond to logic when it's in threat mode. You cannot think your way out of overthinking. That's like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. It feels like action. It feels like progress, but it accelerates the burn. What actually interrupts the rumination loop isn't more thought. It's pattern disruption. When you change your physical state, your breathing, your posture, your location, your sensory input, you send a direct signal to your nervous system that the threat level has changed. Psychologist Dr. Ethan Kross at the University of Michigan calls this technique distanced self-talk, the practice of stepping outside your own narrative, even briefly, to observe your thoughts rather than inhabit them. In study after study, people who learn to say, "Why is this person feeling this way?" instead of, "Why am I feeling this way?" showed measurably lower anxiety, faster emotional recovery, and higher decision-making clarity. Just 3 words, from I to this person, and the neural storm begins to quiet. So here's what you can actually do, starting right now. First, name the loop. The moment you catch yourself spiraling, say it out loud or write it down. I'm in the loop. Naming it activates your prefrontal cortex and begins to deactivate the default mode network. You are literally interrupting the neurological circuit by making it conscious. Second, set a thinking window. Research from the University of Amsterdam found that scheduling a specific 20-minute window for worry and refusing to engage with the thought outside that window reduced overall rumination by 35% within 2 weeks. Your brain isn't being denied. It's being given structure. That matters. Third, move before you decide. A study in cognition found that just 5 minutes of walking before a major decision dramatically improved the quality of the choice. Not because walking makes you smarter, but because it shifts your nervous system from threat mode into exploration mode. Your brain literally thinks differently in a different body state. These aren't hacks. These aren't tips. These are neurological interventions, backed by science, that address the root cause of why your brain loops in the first place. They give your ancient brain permission to rest. Here's the truth they don't put in self-help books. You are not your thoughts. That voice in your head, the one that won't quiet down, the one that replays and rehearses and catastrophizes, that is not you. That is your brain doing its job. And your job, the deeply human, profoundly difficult job, is to notice the difference. Because the moment you stop identifying with every thought your mind produces, something extraordinary happens. The grip loosens, the loop slows, and for the first time in maybe a very long time, you get to choose what to do next. Not your ancient survival brain, not the fear, not the what-ifs and the worst cases and the endless simulations. You. The philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote it nearly 2,000 years ago, and neuroscience has now proven it true. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Your brain was built for a world that no longer exists, but your awareness, your ability to watch your own mind, is something your brain never anticipated. That awareness is your way out. If this video describes something you've felt but never been able to name, that's not a coincidence. This channel exists for exactly that, to take the most complex parts of the human mind and make them feel like something you finally understand about yourself. Hit subscribe if you want to keep going deeper. Because next week, we're uncovering the psychology behind why your brain self-sabotages, not by accident, but by design. The answer will change how you see every decision you've ever regretted.